Well, first of all, I don't care what anyone else says. The research is out there, and I've worked with so many youth groups and so many kids. It needs to be fun. And people say, oh, well, if they don't win. No, the research actually says kids would rather get playing time on a losing team than sit on the bench on a winning team. And if all our leaders out there, sport leaders, don't believe that, go talk to kids. They don't care. We need programming that is age appropriate and develops kids' fundamental base so that regardless of what sport they want to go on and play, later in life, I'm not even talking, at elite level, I'm not talking Olympians, I'm talking about staying healthy. We talk about a nation that's not as healthy as we used to be. Well, we have a vehicle. It's called youth sport. It's how we develop a healthier nation. That's just one part of their life, and they can be more than that. And that might mean if you want to play at the highest level, yeah, it is like you're all in every day. You work your day around how you train and how you eat and how you sleep and, when your training times are. But you're not doing that when you're 12. So I think parents have to realize we can't rush this process, even if you have, the next great player, we can't rush it. And if we do rush it, I think we drive kids away. And I think that is the case in many sports in this country. Kids that are looking pretty good, and then they just fall off and quit. And that's a shame.
As a basketball player, Allison McNeill won multiple provincial titles, multiple national titles in college before taking her talent south of the border and playing in the NCAA to finish her collegiate career. But if she were playing today, Allison says she might never have played basketball at all, and she wonders how many others are in the same boat. Hey there, I'm Scott Rintoul, the host of Better Sports Parents, a podcast dedicated to exactly that, helping you, me, and anyone else out there become a better sports parent. And we do that by bringing on world-class performers from across sport so they can share their insights and perspectives and experiences with you in hopes that it will allow you to focus on some of the things that perhaps aren't in focus in today's youth sports environment. Well, as I just told you, Allison McNeill was a very accomplished basketball player in her own right, but she is most well known for what she did as a coach. She took over the Simon Fraser University women's program in 1988, and for the next 13 years, turned a program that hadn't done very much into one that contended for national championships year in and year out. She also took over the Canadian Olympic team after the turn of the century when the women's program wasn't anywhere near where it is now. And after a 12-year absence from the Olympics, she guided the team back in 2012 and had them competitive at the World Championships level as well. Allison has also given her time to coaching at the youth sports level with grade 2s through 5s and in high school as well. And though she doesn't do it on a regular basis today, she still contributes in that regard on a limited basis. That is to say, she has a very keen eye on what is happening in youth sports today, and she has obviously seen it all the way up in basketball to the national team level. And she's here to share that perspective with you on Better Sports Parents. Allison, thank you very much for doing this and spending time with me here on Better Sports Parents.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks for asking me. It's, I think when we talked, I said it's near and dear to my heart. Sport has been in my life forever. I can't remember my life without sport, and I can't see it even going into my now late 60s and into my 70s not having it. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk and learn and share.
You've coached more hours and more days than most people do in a lifetime, and yet you still keep giving back to the game. And as I mentioned, you still periodically coach at the high school and even younger levels. What is it about it that keeps you coming back?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, you often think like, I did a lot of sports when I was younger, and I always say this, I don't know how basketball grabbed my heart because I'm like 5'2.5". It probably shouldn't have been basketball, but that's what I loved. And my parents said, do what you love. If that's what you love, carry on. So I think it's basketball, but I also now have learned through my coaching that it's so much about relationships too. And so I helped, I just did 5 sessions at Semiamo this year with the girls team because one of my former players is coaching with her sister. So kind of helping them. So what I tell everybody is now I'm doing friends and family. That's what I do, and it's usually a good rate, like 0, it costs you 0. But, yeah, so if a former player calls and wants me to do a session with their daughter's team or even their son's team, obviously, I do that, or if I can do my husband and I, Mike, have done a couple coaching clinics with the Bandits because I think they just do amazing work in our community for basketball and have a pro team, and I think Kyle Julius, outstanding coach. So, just trying to help where I can, but really wanna be doing other things, don't wanna be coaching full time.
We are going to focus on youth sports for the majority of this conversation, but just as far as basketball in general in this country, when you look at the landscape in 2026, what do you see?
Well, I see some sports that my family couldn't afford to put me in. My friends, the same thing. I talked to them. They were like, I could not have played basketball now, the costs that are out there. So I see that. But I also see some real positive things like women's pro leagues that are popping up and the hockey and now the tempo. And we've got some really good role modeling going on. I see more opportunity for young women and young girls. So that's really positive. But I think the thing that's most disturbing for me with watching youth sport is just the cost, the rising costs for parents and the demands that each and every sport is making on those kids, and I worry about that. I worry that it's too much, too young, we're taking the fun out of it, and that's probably what I see. But there are some super positives because that's kinda also something we have to talk about, just way more opportunity and yeah, but I worry about the costs, and I worry about the pressure, and I worry about the overtraining.
Well, let's talk about the cost then off the top
Yeah.
because you mentioned it. Had one of your former proteges on here, Kim Goche, as many people would in BC would have known her, Kim Smith, back in the day. And she said the same thing that she worried about the cost of basketball and that it should be such an easy access, low cost sport. Why do you think at the youth level, the cost of basketball has gone through the roof?
I think that people have seen like every sport, but I think basketball is a little maybe late to the game, late to the bad game. People are seeing, hey, I can get 40 kids in a gym, and I can charge this much, and I can get a rental, through a school board because and whatever, and I can make this. And I think that's what's happened. Is people can see it as profitable, and so I don't know the exact statistics, Scott, but youth sport is a multi-million, billion-dollar industry. I don't know where we're at now, but I mean, even when I was, starting my coaching and I did work with Tri-Cities Youth Basketball. I've done a lot of youth stuff with Basketball BC. It was starting to get expensive, but it was still, I think, within reach of every young woman and every young man and every family. But now I think it's just as profitable. People can make money off kids.
No, I'm with you 100% on that. I think that's exactly where it goes. I don't think people get into it with that intention in most cases. I think that they see the demand, they think they can charge. And I do believe that if you ask each of these operators, they believe they're doing good work and they're contributing to the basketball community. And yet the costs continue to go up and up and up. Do you see any solution to that in the near term?
Yeah, it was scary because I think I consider myself more solution oriented. Like people will say, "Oh, back when I played," I'm like, "We're not going back. So stop. Like we don't need to talk about what it was like when I was in high school or when I was in Princeton growing up. It's not going back. What are the solutions going forward?" And I think there's a couple things. One is we have gyms all over the place. Like we have more gyms in this country than most countries. And I'm thinking personally of my own sport. We have fields, and I think that probably school boards have to stop trying to make money off that. Like I think the rentals have to be less. And I also understand education's suffering, so they can make some extra money off a rental. But when those gyms sit idle, it drives me crazy. I can't bear it. And so I think, could the programming be less if we had these facilities more community oriented and more available to people? I know you can just go out and take your kids out and play soccer, but it's really hard to find a gym. Really hard to find a gym if you want to play volleyball or basketball or badminton inside. So that might help a bit. I don't know if it's even feasible, but possibly some regulations around youth sport. I hate to say that the government step in or Sport Canada steps in and makes some regulations around that. I think what also saddens me with the cost is that playing multisport. If you wanted multisport, you're paying for soccer, then you're paying for volleyball season, then you're paying for basketball season, then you want to join a track club, and you're like, holy cow, it just all adds up. So could we have some kind of a family discount? I don't know. I don't know enough about the club systems and how we're running, but I agree with you on one thing, Scott. I think most people get in to it for the right reasons, and we have some people doing incredible work in all sports, all areas.
Well, you mentioned some levers that could be pulled, and
Maybe.
I'm with you that there's a hesitance to maybe lean on the government for all regulation. However, I do think there are elements of what you just mentioned where the government could step in and say, "All right, you want to register for multisport? We see the value in that. We'll give you some sort of tax break or tax incentive for doing that." I also see at a municipal level or a school board level, if we see these costs spiraling out of control, can the school districts or the individual schools say, we're going to actually give priority to those who are making this affordable, not the ones that are charging through the roof, because that's a lever with the facility I think can be pulled. Would you agree with that?
100%. I've never thought of it exactly like that, but now I'm like, that's a eureka moment for me. I'll take a note when I get a chance. But that's absolutely what should happen because I think the not-for-profits, a lot of the not-for-profits are doing incredible stuff, and they're really providing great opportunities for kids. I mean, in different areas all over the province, but certainly I think rurally and maybe, in the Strathcona area or like some different areas where people are not able to afford these high priced programs. I also think there's a little bit of we have to up the ante, like, everybody's trying to up the ante, so, "Hey, my club's going to Louisville, Indiana, San Francisco, and da and someone else feels like they have to, and I'm like, parents have to learn that that is not what's making your child better, and that's not what's keeping them in sport, and it's not what's keeping them healthy going forward in their life. What is doing that is good sport leadership, safe sport, a safe place to develop and grow and make friends and become a better human being as well as a better athlete. So, yeah, I really like that. I think if we could get the nonprofits to have priority that are more or the more affordable programs.
I really like what you just touched on there because I do think it is so prevalent in today's youth sport environment. This thought that, well, we've got to take the quote unquote best kids from this area and take them all over Canada or North America, maybe even Europe, to show them the best environments. And that's what's going to make them better. You said that's not what's actually making your child better at sport and fall in love with sport. On the flip side of that, because you are solution oriented, what is making someone's child better at basketball or any other sport?
Well, first of all, I don't care what anyone else says. The research is out there, and I've worked with so many youth groups and so many kids. It needs to be fun. And people say, oh, well, if they don't win. No, the research actually says kids would rather get playing time on a losing team than sit on the bench on a winning team. And if all our leaders out there, our sport leaders, don't believe that, go talk to kids. They don't care when they're young. I mean, everybody wants to win, and we sort of impose that on them. But so I think you have to have good sport leaders, good coaches. So we need to train them. We need better access to training. I mean, the NCC programs are outrageously expensive. They're very difficult for coaches that are working full time to get. But we need some, and we have to adhere to safe sport and ethical behavior. All those things are crucial. But I think so. We need good sport leadership. We need programming that is age appropriate and develops kids fundamental base so that regardless of what sport they want to go on and play, later in life, I'm not even talking, at elite level, I'm not talking Olympians, I'm talking about staying healthy. We talk about a nation that's not as healthy as we used to be. Well, we have a vehicle. It's called youth sport. It's how we develop a healthier nation. And I think if we can zoom in on a couple of those things, we're going to be a long way ahead. But yeah, a trip to play in somewhere when you're 12, 13, 14, 15 is ridiculous. That is not getting you better. You need to be in the gym, and you need quality programming, and need strength, you need flexibility, you need the five S's, and we have to hit those windows of development too. When you talk about long-term athlete development, and that's not just athletes for a high level, but when you talk about that, then we have to get kids through the proper stages. If we rush them, we injure them, they drop out of sport by 13, 12, 13, and they don't continue.
You have seen athletes ascend to the highest level, the national level. And obviously, it was during a time where youth sports and the youth sports environment did not look like this. Other than the financial benefit of it, do you see a fundamental difference in how we develop athletes based on where young people are at today?
Maybe I can tell a bit of a story about myself, not that I was a high level athlete, but I certainly am still. I still go to the gym and work out. I love to golf. I mean, I like to move. And So I grew up in Princeton, small town in the Okanagan, close to the Okanagan. And I was first a competitive downhill skier, and that was partly because my parents owned 2 small businesses, so on Saturday, Sunday, they could leave me up at the ski hill and not worry about getting a babysitter. And, so my sister and I would ski, and I was in a ski club, and I raced, and then in the summer, I belonged to swim club because they could also drop me there and stay in the pool all day and whatever. I played softball, fast pitch, and that was big in Princeton. They had a men's tournament and Labor Day, and so you did that, and then I got into school sports, and I did everything. So I just found that when I finished university and I finished basketball, I joined a co-ed volleyball league, and I was good because I played volleyball up to grade 12, and I could actually move, and then I go out and golf, and I'm actually okay. I can join a women's club, and, like, I had a good fundamental base of many sports, and like I said, at the end of the day, I had a few others tugging at me, "Oh, you should do this, you should do that," but it wasn't like now where it's like, "Well, you should play this." Well, might not love that. They might not love that sport, and, I'm small and probably shouldn't have played basketball, but that had became my career, so I think that I think that's important in youth sport. I think that should still be important in the environment. Expose kids to lots of different sports, let them sample the sports, and let them grow and find one that they like, and hopefully they can stick in it, and I think that specializing early has become ridiculous. I mean, specializing at 10, 11, 12. I mean, I know there's some early specialization sports, I get that, and if a kid really, I guess, wants to be a gymnast, they have to specialize early, but most, like, team sports are late specialization sports, and I think we need to let kids sample, be part of different programs. I think there's too much ownership over kids. It's like you do spring, summer, fall basketball with the same club and the same coaches and the same kids, and I'm like, "Oh, I think that would have killed me." It was nice to have a variety.
Well, and you mentioned for your parents, in some respect, it was a need. They needed a place for you to be so that they could actually attend
Work.
to taking care of the household
Yeah.
financially. But
Mhm.
I'm wondering what their influence was in the youth sports environment as well. What did they focus on? What did they reinforce with you?
Well, here's a classic story I tell all my friends. They just go, "I can't believe your dad did that." So I was quite a little phenom in track when I was young because I was an early mature. I was strong. My families were not tall, but we're strong. So I was winning all these events in the Okanagan. I'd go Penticton and win, and I'd have all the. I still have a few of the ribbons. It's just I keep them for funny. And I came home one time, and I guess I was a little full of myself. And my dad said, "Oh my gosh, Allison, check your genetics. You're going nowhere in track." And I'm like, that literally, Scott, the next year, I was losing to all the tall, lanky girls in the 200, and then I was down to the 100, and I finished high school running the start of the relay. But I love track. I really loved it. I still love to watch it, and, but I think my parents were just like, "Just go have fun, like, just play," and I think at times they thought I was a competitive nightmare, like, when I was younger, because sometimes I'd be so upset after I didn't swim well or I didn't and they kind of would just say, "It's just a sport, Al, it's just game," but they nurtured my competitive spirit, and they nurtured me wanting to play basketball. Yeah, so I think my youth sport experience was sampling and competing, and they came to everything. I mean, if I was playing after school, my dad would, leave the hardware store where he worked and zip up to watch my game and then zip back to work. Someone would cover for him, and yeah, they watched and supported. But they never critiqued my coaches. Never. I don't ever remember them saying. And I mean, I'm sure I had a couple that weren't all that good. And my mom and dad were athletes. They curled and they did. My dad was baseball, but they didn't critique that. They never compared me. I don't remember them saying, "Oh, you should get more points than her. You should do this." They didn't do that. They just came, watched, and said, "Hey, that was fun. Good game," or whatever. And then it was over. I don't remember being grilled in the car. They didn't find me a personal trainer. I just played outdoors with the guys. I mean, I know it's changed, and I know some of these things are good things, but I feel like my parents were very supportive, watched a lot, and very hands off otherwise.
Well, obviously, they weren't so focused on results, but they
No.
wanted to make sure that you were humble enough in what you were doing that
Yeah.
you kept the main thing, and as you
Yes.
get
Yeah.
too full of yourself, do you ever remember anything else that maybe they focused on if you went over the line? And again, obviously, it wasn't from a competitive standpoint, they almost had to pull you back in that.
Yeah, they did, yeah. No, no, I remember a couple things. I phoned from university crying, and I talked to my mom, and I thought, I was very close to both of them, but I would say maybe a little closer to my dad in the sporting area. But I got my mom on the phone and I was crying and and then I phoned again and then I might have phoned again. And this was my first year at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario, so a long way. And we won back-to-back national championships. Great coach, great teammates, national team teammates. And then I phoned one day and my dad answered. And he said, "Stop crying right now." He said, "You either go in and talk to your coach or you come home, but don't phone here again." And he hung up on me. And I was like, but I mean, I was first year university and and I'd already lived away from home. I stopped crying immediately and I went, "Oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. Why am I not talking to my coach? Why do I expect to play more? Why am I like why?" And so my dad was very pragmatic with me. And I remember him saying one time when when I was in high school and I was talking about the way I was playing or something, he said, "Well, work harder." Like, that's about it. That's about what he said, just, "Well, work harder." Like, get in the weight room, get in the gym. Because at that point, they knew what I wanted and my goals, and so they were, "Well, this is what you've said, but this is not what you're doing. So, like, these are incongruent. Like, you start." So that was the kinda feedback I got. There was no, "Oh, I can't believe you're being mistreated. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that coach isn't playing you. You're so much better than her." I never, ever heard that. Not one time. It was more like, "What are you doing? What are you doing for yourself? Why aren't you talking to your coach? Why aren't you communicating?" Yeah, it's just that was their approach, both of them.
As you tell that story, I imagine there's some people that might think, "Oh, that sounds a little harsh hanging up the phone." But as you
Yeah,
mentioned, you're 18, 19
yeah,
years old at that point. You're an adult. You're living on
yeah,
your own and you're an independent person. And that sounds like his way of reinforcing that message. We hear a lot now from coaches today. Control what you can control. You can't affect the other parts, so control what you can control. As we apply it to parents in the youth sports environment, I'm just struck by how often parents inject themselves into a situation like you
yeah.
just described. Have you witnessed that evolve over the last number of years as well?
Yeah, you might have to pull me back to that, remember that, because I was gonna add and I thought it was harsh when my dad hung up on me. I thought it was harsh. I was like, "My dad just hung up on me." But we're extremely close, I said, and that was about the 5th or 6th time I'd called from September to probably end of October. And it wasn't about my academics, and my parents had said, like, "That's great, you have sport, but you need to be doing well in school too." So I think that it was just say like, we don't know how to get to her. She's here, she's phoning crying and she's a mess and we're a long way from home. So, hey, come home or get in and talk to your coach. Like you have to handle your personal situation right now. And so I don't think it was harsh. I think it was spot on. Timing made me kind of wake up. And also, it's something that I've referred to many times in my life. Okay, all right, I'm having a hard situation. What is the solution? How do I deal with it? Like crying and phoning home worked, was good for me to get that off my chest. But yeah, so I think that was harsh. Okay, back to, sorry, Scott, renew me on the little bit of that question.
Well, I just want to contrast that to perhaps what you see with parents today, because parents are so involved and they're at a lot of practices. They're at a lot of games, if not every single game. And I do think that we are in an era where parents think the best way to support their child, not all parents, I will emphasize,
Mhm.
but
No, of
some
course.
parents think the best way to support their child is to go and say, "Hey, why is my kid not playing more?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, how come my kid's not the starting point guard or on the power play?" Whereas that certainly wasn't your parents' approach. I'm wondering where that turned and how you see that in today's youth sports environment.
Yeah, that's yes, thank you. That's a great question, and it is out there, and you're right. It's not every parent, and I can give an example. I mean, I coached for 5 years at the high school at Semiahmoo with Lori Pagic, who's a teacher there, and her daughter played on the team, and it was really she also led me a lot because she was a teacher at the school, and though I taught for 4 years, didn't have her experience in the educational environment, and she said, so we started with them in grade 8 and took them to grade 12. And she said, "Oh, Allison, just so you know, I'm going to close the practice to parents," and I was like, "Okay, why would we do that?" She said, "Well, because they'll come." I was like, "What?" And we had great parents. It's not those parents. I'm just saying I was in shock because 'cause I've been coaching at the national team level. Parents don't come. They don't come. You're coaching adult women, some have children, so your relationship was with them. So then that's when the sort of the light went on like, "Oh, okay. These parents." We had a parent meeting, of course, both of us there, lots of questions. Our parents were great. But yeah, I think the landscape's changed and I'm not I can't actually tell you why or when it happened, and I think part of it happened because we monetized it. I think that parents are more involved when they're paying, so school not as much, but the club stuff, certainly. I think we're selling dreams. We're selling things that are, it's a bit of the FOMO, the fear of missing out, so parents wanna push. And then there's been a whole shift to stand up for yourself. I don't disagree with that. Be strong to that. Those are good things. But I also think you're doing it for your child and they're never learning to do it for themselves. And I think they'll get in environments where they're going to need to be able to communicate with their boss, with their partner, with their whatever in life. So, yeah, but that was eye opening to me. I've seen a parent come off out of the stands, walk over and talk to a coach during a game more than once. Watching basketball, yeah, and I still watch a lot. Didn't get to a lot of the BCs this year, watched online, but I've seen that. Mike and I were recruiting for University of Oregon. We were down at a game in, doesn't really matter, in a gym, and a dad was screaming, and the ref said it was an AAU game. Dad was screaming at the refs, and his daughter on the bench, you could immediately tell which one because she was looked distraught. And the ref said, if this doesn't stop, we're calling the game. She got off the bench. She walked over to her dad, asked him to stop. He swore at her. He swore at the refs, and they called the game. And I mean, we haven't been at Oregon we left there in 2005. So it was back then. I mean, I've seen some frightful things where you're just taking the joy of playing from your children and, overemphasizing being the best and overemphasizing winning. Those are sad things to see. Because I had such joy and I still get joy playing sport and I had so much fun and I have so many good friends still from those times in high school. But taking kids joy by being so involved in, I guess too, my dad has said one time something like, the best way to parent your kid is some healthy neglect. I was like, "Healthy neglect? What does that mean?" And, and I asked him when I got a little bit older, he said, "Well, you gotta, you gotta parent them, but sometimes you gotta turn a blind eye and let them figure it out for themselves and, not neglect, but that idea that you're not involved in every single thing they do," you know? So I don't know. But, yeah, I've seen quite a bit. I think sometimes if the expectations are set and there's good communication with the parents, you can negate some of that. I don't think, but there has to be some good communication. And also at every level, Scott, you know this, you played sport, but at every level, you have to explain to the kids what their role is, how they fit in, how they can get better, that what they bring is valuable. And when they're younger, they have to play. We have to play everybody. We're not trying to win, at the U8 soccer tournament. I hope.
And again, the kids are going to try to win, but that's not our focus. And I know that's exactly what you're saying right now. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And I really want to come back to that point of creating value with every single player on the team. No one does it alone in a team sport. Individual sport, those people still need help. Those athletes still need help. They still have coaches and trainers and all different pieces. We seem to focus on the person who scores the most points or the most goals or whatever the case may be. And if we don't create value on a roster as coaches and as parents reinforcing that, what do we think kids are going to focus on, Allison?
I know. Exactly. Yeah. And, they're going to leave because I think that ceases to be fun at some point. Here I am, I've coached grade twos a whole bunch of times with Tri-Cities Youth Basketball, and I've coached in the Vancouver Sports Club with Brian Lee, who has that club, and brought some kids up some of the kids I coached at Semiahmoo from, I think I started with them in grade 5. So I've done a lot of youth sport, not just on the sidelines, but also just watching, but coaching. And what I've seen is that kids will stay with it when they're with their friends, and it's boys and girls. I don't want to just hear it's girls, but we take them to a select team so early. So now we've taken them away from their friends. So that social bonding that's so important in sport and at a young age. Like later, I'm pretty sure, Luka Doncic or whatever, that their friends are not as important at that level. But we have to get them, get them there if they want to be there. But so we take them we take them a long drive away. So now instead of playing in your neighborhood, you're having to get in the car with your mom or dad and drive an hour to train in Vancouver. If you're in Surrey, you're going up to North Van or West Van or something. And now that becomes a job. I'm spending all this time in the car when I could be with my friends or my family. I think we've just made it too much, too young. And I don't think that's fun for kids. We have to maintain that it's fun and fun. You're right. They want to win. They try to win. I mean, I remember having some youth stuff in with Tri-Cities Youth Basketball, and kids were crying after, and then that's a life lesson. Now we sit down. Okay, did you give your best effort? Did you play as hard as you could? Did you feel good about what happened? Sometimes you lose, but we get up. We try again.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, it's got to be about joy. And you obviously had that for a number of sports. But as you said earlier in this conversation, basketball grabbed your heart. You didn't grow to be ultra tall. So it wasn't from a physical standpoint, despite the
No.
fact you said you were an early developer. What was it about basketball that gave you so much joy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one is I really did enjoy the team aspect of it. Like I enjoyed being with my friends and being out there. But I think too, it's an invasion sport, right? So you're right with your opponent. I liked that young. I was aggressive and I was, kind of a toughie and small, obviously. So I liked that about that. I never got to play hockey and I never got to play soccer, but I think they're two sports I would have liked because they're similar, where there's teamwork, but there's you get the one-on-one in basketball where you get to guard someone and they get to guard you. And so I like that, but I really like the team aspect probably as much, if not more than anything about sport. And so I gravitated a bit to volleyball and basketball by the time I got to high school.
So you mentioned that one of the things we need to keep with kids in the team environment is that joy, or in any environment, quite frankly, with youth sports, individual or team. As a coach, because everyone's going to be motivated by something a little bit different, how do you facilitate joy?
That's a great question. So, first of all, I think you play sport because you like to move, and I hope that's part of it. The kids want to be moving, and so we can't make practices so technical and tactical when they're young. Like, I did coaching development for Tri Cities, and I did stuff for Basketball BC. And you go in and evaluate coaches, or sometimes just go in and they'd ask you to come in with a practice plan and work with them. And I mean, I could probably in a 1 hour practice, just because I'm experienced, I can get you know 10 things, probably more than 10 things done, covered, like, quick, da, da, and you'll watch a coach who gets 2 or 3, and the kids are, like, staring at the ceiling and, rolling their head and look like they're gonna pass out because you're not keeping them moving. So, I think the first thing with joy is there's gotta be action. You gotta be doing stuff. You can't listen to coaches yak, 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 yak. Like, I mean, if you say more than 3 things to youth kids, they won't remember. They'll remember 1, maybe. Maybe they might not remember that one, but you gotta get them moving, and I think the best way to learn is to try and to do, and, they talk about, certainly in our sports, small-sided games, so it's not like we don't play 5-on-5 basketball. I had a parent come up to me and said, "I really," I've watched some of the practices the coach is doing, and I really think, they never play 5-on-5. I said, "Oh, that is such a good thing." "Well, how are they ever gonna go in the game play 5-on-5?" I said, "It's not really about that, Rain, it's about how many touches did they get in basketball playing 3-on-3, lots of shots, lots of defense. Then we'll move them to 5-on-5. But if we spend the whole hour that we have in youth sport playing 5-on-5, some kids never touch the ball. Like, it's just that stuff that parents don't understand. If they understood development a bit more, they'd realize that it's great if your kid's the one touching the ball all the time, but it's not so great if you have a late mature or a kid who hasn't developed. Or, in basketball, I said there's sometimes the kind of unsure kid, the shy kid, and that they're like, I don't know how to get the ball from them. But once they've figured out, they can be a terror. And we would want them to be playing basketball, that's for sure. But yeah, that I think that they got to play. You've got to structure practice so that it's fun, that everybody's touching the ball. It should be one ball, one kid, and lots of doing stuff. Um, and then in games, you have to sure, we try to win, but we play everybody. Like, I don't even understand at youth sport how anybody is thinking that winning is the most important thing. We had a guy, Bob Bigelow, I think he played in the NBA, but he came up here and did a clinic a long time ago. He's a youth sport guy, and he said, "If kids are sweaty, red-faced, smiling, and wanting to come back, you have had a great youth practice." And I kinda believe that. Smiling, sweaty, red-faced, and wanna come back. And if it's anything else, I'm not sure that we're gonna capture them at the youth level. So that's one thing. I think you've said it and I've said it, valuing everything that kids bring because not everybody is going to bring the same things. When I coached the national team, we had players from all over Canada, obviously, and some could really score, like Kim Smith, and others really defended. And I don't I don't think we valued Kim more than we valued Chelsea Aubry, or we valued, Krista Phillips. I think that we tried to value all of them, and I think they all tried to value each other, and that's certainly in a team sport. But also, you're not your sport. Like, you know, you're more than a basketball player, and I think I've really tried to emphasize that with the kids that I've coached at the high school level. Like, you're more than that. I mean, it's important to you. I get it. Like, you're 17 and basketball's the most important thing, but you're more than that. And so I think if we value kids for, being good kids, good people, good teammates, that's important.
Do you see a line where it moves from, hey, the main thing here is everybody's playing close to equally, and we're making sure that we're keeping everybody in it, as opposed to now we've crossed that threshold and it's competitive and we can't
Yep.
play everybody the same now?
Yep. Yep. So I think all the stats say that dropout rates around 12 and 13 years old. Is that right? That's what you've seen. And so I think somehow we have to get past that threshold. So I don't know the exact statistics. I'm not even sure. It's probably different for different kids in different sports, but I don't want to see it at 12 and 13. I want to see us go past that. Now, can we have a select team at that age? I mean, I maybe, but I think that's part of what's driving kids out of sport. And I've heard parents say, well, it's so important right now for them to have competition. I was like, really? You think at 12 and 13, if we want them to still be, I mean, even if I'm talking a national team athlete, which national team's been really important to me, I don't think I care if they're in a super competitive environment at 12 and 13. I really don't, because if they're competitors, they're competitors, but they will develop that and they will get more competitive. We can help them be more skilled, more knowledgeable in the sport, better sport IQ, better fundamental movement skills. They're going to be less injured. Then I think then you can up it. So I'm just going to wildly say, without any knowledge, after 13. Yeah, because I think if that's where we're losing them, there's got to be some reasons for that, and part of that is taking them away from their friends, getting too serious, having to go to like actual training instead of just playing, and yeah, but I don't know for sure. But I think that there will be kids that could do it earlier, and there'll be some that, it might be better when they're 14, 15. But I mean, you see it. I'm seeing you 8 select teams. You 8.
Yeah, the cheering happens so early, and I'm with you. I think it happens too early in most cases. There are situations where I understand it for a safety reason, where you've got early developers, and this probably happens more on the male side, but I do see it on both sides, that you have early developers and you go, I don't know if I want to have these 2 children in the same environment where it's a physical sport because of a safety reason. But I think that's rare. I think mostly it's about what you said earlier, people thinking there needs to be this competition. We need to be bringing the quote unquote best players into the best environments, and that to me is adult driven as opposed to kid driven.
Absolutely, yeah, and I could see it, like, I don't know how old would grade 8 be?
Grade 8 is 13 years old.
Oh, okay. That's sort of where I feel like maybe in grade 8, I mean, there's school programs and there's other school programs, and so some sports are more school-based, some aren't, so it's all just depends, but I think around 13, kids start to go, "Oh, I like this, I wanna be pretty good at this," and they're starting to see themselves against other players and going, I'm pretty good," or, "I love it. I just love it. I don't know how good I am, but I love it." And that was me in Princeton. I had no idea if I was good or bad. I'm in Princeton. No one's traveling to Vancouver to play. We're not going on a select team to Indiana. I don't know. I just love it. So I'm training away in Princeton and end up being pretty good, being able to play at Division One. I didn't know. No one was putting a video out on me. I just had a passion. So things are different. But yeah, I think if we can maybe hold off till about that age to really put teams together. And again, I agree with you. I've seen with my youth sport, I've seen 12-year-old boys that are like my smaller than me and 12-year-old boys that are 6 foot. So is such a difference in guys. Yeah, there can be such a difference. So, and I mean, there is the odd kid, I guess, that you can play up, but I feel like they lose something. I've always said in basketball too, I think it's neat to be able to be the kid who dominates a little bit, like you're pretty skilled in your age group and you can, you know, and I don't just mean score. I mean, you could be a good player, make your teammates better, whatever, and then maybe move up. I think sometimes we're rushing them and we forget about the social reasons and other reasons.
I want to come back to something you touched on a couple of minutes ago. you spent most of your coaching career coaching at the collegiate level and then the national team level. And I do think there is a misconception from a lot of parents about what college and national team coaches are looking for compared to what they think college and national team coaches are looking for. Because, as you said, well, we've got to get in this environment, we've got to be seen. How are we going to do that if we're not there and developing to the best of our ability? When you were recruiting at those levels and making those selections for higher levels of sport, what were you looking for in your athletes?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one thing I will say that sometimes cracks me up, and I'm old, so I can say this now, but I would have coaches come up to me, that like, I'm 5'2", Mike's about 5'8". We both played university basketball, shockingly, but I'm pretty sure if we had kids, they would not be national team athletes. We are tiny people, like, our families are small. So I have these coaches that come up and, their daughter's in grade 8, she's a pretty good basketball player. I think she has national team potential. I'm looking at him and his wife, and I'm thinking, "You're crazy. Like, what is wrong with you?" Like, but I don't say that, but I often say, "She's grade 8, let her play, let her enjoy. If it happens, it happens. Work hard, whatever." But there's obviously at that level, there's genetics. I'm just gonna that's the first thing. Like, if you look at basketball, there's certain things. Size matters in basketball. Like, you have to have some big kids, and so there's some advantages there. Speed, that's probably an important thing in every sport. So if your kids are really quick and, they go to RBC training ground and they get, something they get identified, then that's great. But I think we looked for passion at I certainly did at the university level, at Oregon, at Simon Fraser. Like, are they passionate about getting better? Not passionate about winning, not passionate about, because I think anybody that wants to play at that level wants to win. But are they passionate about getting better? Because that's really what it's about in sport. Like, can I continue to stay loving my sport, loving improving? Can I be the best at getting better? That was sort of what we used with our national team when we hadn't qualified for a lot of years, and then we finally qualified for our first Worlds in 202, and we talked about being world class at getting better. Like, and we did. The players got stronger, they got fitter, they improved their skills. So I think we looked for that, for sure. And then, I mean, like I said, genetics is just a factor, but it's not the only factor. But passionate and people that were willing to get better, and people that understood that it takes work. That it's not just like I just show up and I'm good. Like, then we can get kids thinking that when they're young. I had a coach one time say to me, "Oh, I saw the best grade 4 I've ever seen." I was like, "I don't even know why we would say that, but okay." She did not play university basketball. I remembered it specifically because I was like, "What?" She did not play university basketball, but she was the best grade 4 he'd ever seen. So I don't know. Yeah, and so we looked at that. Obviously, people that can play with others, good teammates, good people, because you travel, you go on the road with them. Competitors, for sure. I mean, competitive people. Yeah, you gotta be at that level. And, I mean, obviously, some skill. You have to have some skill. You can't just be a deluxe athlete and play at the next level, I mean, in anything, because you have to have some skill.
Yeah, and you're right. You have to have skill, and I think too often the one skill that gets focused on is scoring. And look, we need scorers in every single sport, but I try to remind not only my own kids, but the little bit of coaching I've done, I try to remind other kids as well that there's only one ball and only one person has it at a time. So if you're on a basketball court, what are the other 4 players doing when your teammate has the ball? If you're on a football field, if a running back has it or if a receiver has it, that means everybody else has to block at the same time when we're on offense. Are you willing to do those other things? I think coaches look for those things. Parents need to be educated for when they're watching the game so that their expectations align with that. How do we teach them this, Allison?
Yeah, that's great. Because I honestly, when I decided that, when I figured out in Princeton that you could actually play university basketball, didn't know probably till grade 10, and then I moved to Salmon Arm and played my grade 11, 12 there. So there's that. But I think when your child really has a passion for it and they say they want to do this, I would be, as a parent, I would be doing everything possible to help them. Of course, you would do that. I mean, I think any you know, parent would do that. Like, it's just, so I get why they hire the personal trainers. I get why they get them into all these different programs. I do get that. It's not like when your kid says they want it. I think we just have to be careful as a parent that we don't sell the farm on this one thing, because if it doesn't work out, I feel like that's a real blow to someone's love of it and that what they can do in the future, maybe coaching, maybe officiating, maybe getting their own kids into it. And also that what I said earlier, they're not their sport. That's just one part of their life and they can be more than that. And that might mean if you want to play at the highest level, yeah, it is like you're all in every day. You work your day around how you train and how you eat and how you sleep and when your training times are. But you're not doing that when you're 12. So I think parents have to realize we can't rush this process, even if you have, the next great player, we can't rush it. And if we do rush it, I think we drive kids away. And I think that is the case in many sports in this country. Kids that are looking pretty good, and then they just fall off and quit, and that's a shame.
That's often labeled burnout, and in some cases, that's what it is. It's a loss of interest. In other cases, it's a fact that for some kids, as you mentioned earlier, it has become a job at some point, and they've lost the joy or the interest that goes along with that particular sport. I'm wondering at the national team level and even the collegiate level, because you were in 2 places where you had to transform a culture. You went to SFU, things weren't great, and you turned that around. The national team, when you got the national program with Canada's women basketball, things weren't great, and eventually got back to where you're going to the Olympics and you're going to the world championships and being competitive in those environments. I know it's a loaded question, but what are the key ingredients to transforming a culture?
That's very interesting because the first thing that popped in my head, and I firmly believe this both at SFU and at Oregon, we went into a situation that they'd fired their coach, and so there were situations there too. But more familiar for me, obviously, Simon Fraser and the national team, is I just don't think you can get it done without commitment and good people. So that I mean, I I think again, I'm old, I can say this now. I think I did a phenomenal job at SFU of recruiting. I had unbelievably great people, hardworking, driven in the classroom, not all at the same level, but, they did their work. I didn't have to worry about that. But, if I said we're doing 3 individual workouts a week and 3 lifts, they're like, "Yeah, okay. That I expect to work hard." So, they were hardworking, they were committed, they had good emotional intelligence that they could fit in with teammates, and the national team, the same thing. We went, "Who's gonna stay committed? Who's going overseas to play?" Because when we took over the national team, that had sort of fallen off. We didn't have players overseas. I think we had 2, and who's going to do the training? And so immediately, we're talking about putting in fitness standards and strength standards and things that if you can't meet them, then we're not world class, and it's not my fault. It's nobody's fault. You just don't want to do it. So that was kind of how we did that, but also a caring culture, a culture built on relationships. I always say that I've given toast to the brides at several weddings. I've coached my players' children, and like I think it's an important thing to know that we're all in it together. So I think that builds your culture when everybody's vital, everybody's important. It's not just the all American or the all Canadian that matters. It's everybody. Yeah, it's just fun to be part of those kind of environments, and so maybe I just have a good feel for how to build that and the right kind of people and the right expectations, the right standards. Because it's a lot. There's a lot I mean, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Every pro team would be amazing, and there wouldn't be problems, but, yeah, you have to get the right people, and you have to have the right standards, and you have to have the right expectations, and I think the right value on winning, like, what it means to win. I mean, we went back to NAIA nationals and lost in the finals, I don't know, at least 2 times, maybe maybe more. You feel horrible. You're like, "I can't believe we got that far and lost," but it wasn't like you didn't do your best. It wasn't the end of the world. We all got up the next day, went to class.
Well, and you were at a level where winning was actually important. And what we're talking about in youth sports, it's not for the most part, but I do think that culture that you're looking for is very important. And I think parents need to look for that so much more than our program churned out player X, Y, and Z, or our team won this many medals last year in our respective sport. That culture you're looking for, I think it's a feel thing. I think if you've been around it, you see it and you get it. And I also think that you know when you don't see it as well, and I think it's a vital thing to be a part of. And for me as a parent and as someone who's been in the athletic world for a long time, one of the things I look for is the relationship between the coach and the players and the coach and the parents. And I think that second one is often neglected. I think a lot of coaches aren't sure how to talk to parents who, in many cases, are their peers because they're volunteers. And to me, that's where the problems begin. Because now, as you mentioned earlier, expectations aren't aligned. When you are coaching coaches, how do you direct them in that regard, Allison?
Yeah. Oh, that is something that's in the NCCP, Canada Basketball, Basketball BC, is you must have a parent meeting and you must lay out the expectations. And I think you have to be open to talk to the parents. And so my parents owned small businesses. They owned a movie theater and they're part owners of a hardware store. And my mom worked in a dress shop. And so they're small business people. And my sister and I would work for them. And we also worked at the gas station in Princeton. So we all were working all the time. I just remember my dad saying to me, Allison, we're here to make the customer, like we're here for the customer. But if they ever treat you poorly, then you have to stand up or you come and get me. Or if someone comes into the theater or the gas station and starts railing on you for something you did. But he didn't say the customer is always right. He was not that. But basically, we're in service. And I think as a coach, and I'd say this at all my coaching clinics that I do with youth coaches, what is the most important thing? Well, I'll ask you, Scott, what's the most important thing in your life?
As a coach,
No, as a parent.
well, that's my kid.
Okay. So that's pretty simple. And that's why I asked you, because I've never asked a parent who hasn't said that. And so if you're coaching someone else's child, you are coaching everything that matters to them. And if we don't take that seriously as a youth coach, I don't care if you're a volunteer. Don't volunteer if you can't do it properly. You need to become educated. You need to do safe sport. I did all that stuff. I have all that. I did ethical coaching online. I did the safe sport module. Why? Because I work with kids. I got my criminal record check. This is what you do, and this is what we should do. And so when a parent comes to you and they're angry or upset, it's understandable. They care about their child, the most important thing in their life. So if you take that approach in youth sport and then you try to de-escalate and you also understand where that's coming from, that relationship can be great with parents. I mean, I honestly, my relationship with the parents at Semiahmoo, now they're high school kids, but still, they were great. I actually was out for coffee with one of them this morning when I didn't golf, so we went for a coffee. But yeah, it's just you have to understand that this is the most important thing in their life, their child.
Very well said. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I asked about seeing culture and knowing when it's a good culture. I want to put that on coaches now. As someone who's coached for so long and done it so well, what do you see in a coach that has you say, especially at the youth sports level, that right there, that's a good
Yeah,
coach?
yeah. I think it's the one that can almost put themselves in the shoes of the child. So I used to say to coaches, if you played sport and then you get to I think even now I can, as we discuss, I can visualize my youth sport experiences. They're in my mind. They make me feel good. And I go, if you can put yourself back to that and make every experience for the child like that, I think we have to be able to make it an enjoyable experience. Every day you wanna go in the gym or the arena or wherever you coach these kids and have them leave there feeling really great about themselves and really great about what they just did and just like, "That was the best part of my day." We have to show up even as a volunteer because that's not an excuse to be bad. "I volunteered. Sorry, I don't treat kids properly." What? That's not an excuse. So I think we have to, communicate with the kids. We have to learn our sport a bit, learn what you're doing so that you can make a good youth practice, make it a lot of fun for them. I think we have to keep in perspective the winning and the losing and how we teach them to compete and we teach them to try to win. But when it's all said and done, we did our best. I mean, there's nothing more than you can ask of a child than they did their best. But we can teach them. We've got to work harder. We got to be a little tougher. We've got to, share the ball a bit more, whatever lesson needs to be taught. But I think the things I would look for in culture is, does that coach understand their role in the child's experience, or is it about them? You know, are they trying to win the league, or they're the grade 8 or the U8 whatever league. So do they understand the child's experience? Do they kind of get down to the child's level? So do they speak in terms that the child can understand, like when I'm working with the younger kids, I'm quite often I'm pretty small, but I'm down talking to them because they're really intent in telling you something super special. And so you've got to be engaged in listening to them. I think you have to develop them for long term. It's not just for the weekend game. Like, if all you're doing is preparing them so we can win on the weekend, then you're not keeping them in sport. So, you know, proper warm-ups, proper cool downs, strength stuff, speed stuff, working with kids, and there's a lot to learn. I mean, it's a big gig. I understand that, the volunteering, and we appreciate every volunteer. I certainly do, but I also think we can learn more. So I think I'd look for those things, but mostly I'd probably look for someone that treated my child well.
Allison, I'm with you 100%. And as a parent, that's exactly what I want my kids to be in as far as an environment goes, with someone who knows how to treat them. I am less concerned with whether they can develop their technical soccer, basketball, track, football, whatever skill, and more concerned that they are enjoying what they're doing and that they're being treated with respect and at an age appropriate level. That's what I want. I think it's really difficult to screen for that, especially in the volunteer environment. But if you have any suggestions, I'm all ears because the longer I do this, the less I I think that clubs should focus on, well, he or she played at this level. So yeah, we're happy to hand them over to the kids. I want good people. How do we vet that?
Yeah, and I'm telling all these stories and hopefully well, I know you've got lots of listeners, but hopefully a couple of people I've talked about aren't listening. But I've actually had parents who have said they don't think the coach is good enough for their child at their school or that I'm like, "What? Your daughter's in grade 6 and she's being coached by I don't know, it doesn't matter. I mean, is that person a good person? Or they but I mean, I'm seeing that, and it's funny because I remember someone saying to me when I was at Semiahmoo, and we had very good players. They'd played some club together. We had multi-sport athletes. They did soccer at the school, track, volleyball, but we had some really good athletes. And they said, "Oh, it's just so unfair because you and your husband both coach the national team." I'm like, "Okay, but it's not like I'm doing national team stuff with the high school kids." Like, sometimes, they're late for practice. Sometimes they've got something to do. Like, it was kind of a funny comment. It's like, well, no, most people aren't gonna get a national team coach coaching their high school team. Okay, I get that, but that's not the most important thing. That's not I didn't feel like that's what I brought, and I think if you asked the players that I coached, I think they'd say, "I made it fun. We made it fun, our whole staff." And I think we cared about them, and I'm still texting with 2 of them yesterday, and, like, it's just part of, yeah, what you want for your child, but I think we do that. We do that well, if we bring in, the national team coach, or if we bring in the Whitecaps to if we that's not important at the youth level. What's important is that they enjoy their experience, they have someone that cares about them, gives them a safe environment where they feel like they can make mistakes, they can grow as a person, where they teach them some leadership skills, where they hold them accountable for work ethic, or they hold them accountable for communication and how they treat other people. Those are important lessons, and you don't get any high level without those lessons.
Well, it's really interesting you bring that up because you talked about earlier, and Jumpstart's state of play has showed this as well through their data that the most important things for kids are fun and friends and fitness. And yeah, winning comes somewhere down the line, but it goes in that order of fun and friends. But that also goes back to the relationship and the environment that's created by the coach. And there's also a lot of data out there now that suggests the most effective coaches are the ones where the players knew, whatever the level, that the coach cared about them. And if you ask even people who have played sports, whatever level, who their best coach was, it almost always goes back to a coach who believed in them, cared about them, and it goes far beyond what they did as far as results go. Was that always inherent to you, or did you learn that somewhere along the way, Allison?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I don't know, I've always felt that way ever since I started coaching. And I remember a parent saying to me, "Oh, you're so and so's favorite coach," like when I was coaching club, and she's in all kinds of sports. I said, "Oh, that's so nice." And she said, "Yeah, because she says you listen to her." I was like, Note to Allison, note to self. Yeah, because I think a lot of times kids aren't listened to, and yet they want autonomy. They want to be able to try their own things and do some of their own things. I think it was a bit inherent to me because I played so many sports, and so I kinda knew what felt good to me, what coaches I mean, I kind of knew I was going into sport probably by maybe grade 11, something in sport, phys ed teacher, whatever I was gonna do, and so I think I knew that that was important. Funny thing, one day, Mike and I are driving in the car, and we're listening to sports talk radio, and there's interviews with the top, I'm going to say 5 number 1 draft pick, or the top draft picks in the NHL. So we're listening, and they're interviewing them. And this is no joke, Scott. This is exactly what happened. It was some years ago. Each and every one of them said, at one point, I had a coach who believed in me. Mike and I were like dumbfounded. We almost had to pull over. And we've always said that, like I said, it was years ago. I was probably just starting coaching national team. But I think that's really crucial, that you believe in all your kids, and you believe in, and it doesn't necessarily mean you believe they're all going to be at a high level, but you believe in them as people. You support them. You listen to them. You find a place for them to belong, and that's what sport can do. It's just such an amazing thing. So I agree with you. I think that is the most important thing in any level coach.
I had a teacher say that to me once at BCIT, and it was a great story that he relayed. And he said, we had this one teacher, her name Mary Kay Thurston, phenomenal. And he said to me, "You know why she's a better teacher than I am?" I said, "No, tell me your opinion on that." And he said, "Well, I really want to work with the people that I can see are going to become great journalists, but it's hard for me to see the people in the class who I know don't wanna work hard enough or whatever, or I know they don't have that capability. It's hard for me to work with them, but she wants to get people who might only get to a level of 6 on a scale of 1 to 10 to a 6. That's why she's such a great teacher. She doesn't care if they're a 10 or a 6. She wants to reach their full potential. I think that applies to coaching as well. I think that's what you're saying.
So cool. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I coached an athlete at Semiahmoo. So her mom played basketball at UBC, Lori Kemp. And her dad was a baseball guy, Maddie McKinnon. And she's on the national softball team, but she played basketball. And I said, she's got as much going for her. She would have played high level basketball if she wanted, but softball was her thing. But she had a demeanor and a way of playing. But I'm going, well, do I ignore her because she doesn't love my sport quite as much as I love my sport? No, she played right to grade 12. I mean, I remember one game, I think she had hit 7 threes. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But I never once said, oh, you should play basketball. This is her thing, right? But I believed in her as much when she was playing basketball as a basketball player. But I wasn't about to say, oh, I'm not going to work with her because she didn't want to she won't go to the next level in basketball. Yeah, I mean, that's craziness. And I also think where's what's the word I'm looking for? The transformational coaching, right? We should all strive to be transformational coaches where we help kids transform and become the best version of themselves. And there's no greater joy. Again, another Semiahmoo story, but a Semiahmoo player who was just came off the bench and did some good things, but she was like, I still have it on my phone. She sent me video. She's a grade 7 piano player. She's brilliant. She played basketball. But I went and watched her I went to the concerts, the band concerts, because we had 2 kids in band. Because I was interested and they were interested. And I was like, wow, they're in band. I don't know band. And I think you have to care about your players on another level to actually be super successful. And that's a big part of what you said, culture.
Well, and you know this as well as I do. If you ask parents, and yeah, coaches for that matter, they know that not all of those players are going to go play in high school, university, or professionally. But our hope when we put our kids in sports or when we're coaching our kids is that they take these principles that they learn through sport, which is an incredible vehicle for so many different character traits. And we hope they bring them into being a teacher or a lawyer or whatever their profession happens to be, and this good community member. When you were coaching, were you explicit about that with your players that those character traits they were building were going to take them to other places in their life as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I would bring in articles at SFU, anything like when I was there and at Oregon, everywhere. And even with national team, we'd have a saying of the day and we discuss what it meant for sport and our national team, but what it meant also otherwise. But I remember bringing articles into SFU about the whole thing about women in sport and C-suite positions and if you're in a team sport, that really helps. And yeah, like that was stuff that we talked about and talked about being, trying to get physically strong because there tends to be for young women that like there can be at times a trend to where the thinner the better. And I'm like, what? But you want to be strong. You like this is important going forward in your life that you can, you know, well, now me in retirement, pick up my golf clubs and get them on but I think trying to stress those things is important, like being able to give some messages outside of just the sport. I think I definitely tried to do that. I mean, wasn't perfect. And I would like to take back a couple of my first years at SFU. I think I yelled too much. I think I was maybe overly demanding. And I think some of it was based on the way I'd been coached in the 70s. Not my high school coach, he was phenomenal, but other coaches. And then me learning, okay, there's better ways to do it. And I think when we know better, we do better. And I think that was a big thing for me in coaching. I think I just tried to evolve and be better for my athletes. But I know it started for me, Scott, in the youth. Like, I just had such great sporting experiences. Like, I just loved everything about it. And even to this day, if I can't get out and do something sporty, you know, for 5 days in a row, I'm going crazy.
Well, you make a really important point, and whether you're a volunteer or you're a paid coach at the youth level, don't take for granted the imprint that you can have on a child's life. Really take that seriously and pour that into why you're there and what you're trying to do for these children, because as you mentioned, it influenced your entire life because of some of the coaching you received along the way. It's such a critical piece of this, Alice. And I do think because we're all so busy now and people are grabbing a practice plan on their way out the door, I think we lose that sometimes at the youth sports level.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, and I think that it's a really important thing to remember that outside of your parenting, outside of your family, so your mom, dad, maybe grandma, grandpa, maybe you're close to aunts and uncles. I don't know how everybody's family, but I spent more time with my high school coach and coaches and teammates than I did with my parents because that was super serious by then. At Salmon Arm, we won back-to-back provincial championships, had an undefeated season. We were in every morning. We lifted, but as a collective group, our coach pushed us, but he wasn't like a crazy man. This is what we wanted as a group, and it was sort of tradition. So I don't know. I just think if my coach had been a bad person, I don't know if my parents, I think they would have said, well, you're done. You're out of there. You're not, I don't care how much you love it. We'll find somewhere else for you to be. But he was a great guy and a huge influence in my life. But your kids are with their coaches a lot if they're stay in sports. So yeah, you can be a huge influence and a super positive influence and someone outside the family telling them they're doing well. I remember, some of my players say, "Oh, my parents say I played well all the time." I'm like, "Well, that's their job. I'm here to tell you that you could get better." Yeah, it's huge. You can be a huge influence. I mean, I honestly, if I hadn't been, coached at a high level, I always say this, I loved grade fives, grade five, 10-year-olds. It's just they're still crazy enthusiastic, but they can learn more and you can do things with them. And it's just actually anywhere from 10 to 12 is just a fun age group to coach.
Throughout the course of your coaching career, you were a trailblazer in many of the roles you had. We see a lot more women in high authority positions as far as coaching goes, as far as level these days, but it certainly wasn't always the case. And we're still not probably where we need to be in that regard. I'd love to know how much progress you think we've made because the you need to see it to be it is a very real
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
and how we can be better at that in the youth
right.
sports environment.
Yeah. So I actually had a little interview with Jill Moffat. I don't know if you know Jill. Anyway, yeah. And so this is an area that she studies, and she's written a couple articles, I think, for either CIRC or Women in Coaching of Canada, I think. And she said it's not improved that much, and so I understand it. And then there's various reasons. I mean, I just went to a conference 2 weeks ago, like on this very topic. How do we keep girls in sport? How do we keep female coaches in sport, and it can be difficult. But I'll just give you one story. She used to play at UBC, and I won't say her name, but I saw her out coaching a regional team some years ago. And she's got 2 degrees. Well, now she's going to know probably, but it doesn't matter. She's brilliant and was excellent coach. Like I watched her, she just coached a regional team, like a U14 regional team. And so she came over and we were talking. I said, "Oh, I love the way you coach them." She said, "Oh, it's so enjoyable. And it's just such a step away from my academic life." And I said, "Oh, it's good." I said, "Are you going to maybe move on, coach provincial team?" "Oh, I think that's too much time." She said, "I'm not even sure I'm going to keep doing it." She said, "Because I just can't find my community here." And I was like, "Okay, problem." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well," she said, "when I played, I was around all these other women, highly motivated, and we'd chit-chat and we'd train together and compete. And she said, now I come here and there's just, I've hardly seen any other women coaching. I don't see any women. And I think it's what you said. So, I think it's difficult. Sometimes women want to see other women coaching, so they don't want to necessarily get in that environment. I think a lot of women think they're not qualified enough. And I think at the youth level, that's ridiculous because we have to encourage them. They can do it. And with a few little, like knowing how to do a good practice and a few drills and skills, and they can do it. And I think obviously sometimes family arrangements are, if both parents are working, maybe only one can take time off while the other has to take the other kids. I mean, I know there's lots of reasons, but I'd love to see more women in youth coaching. I'd like to see the moms, if they have time, to step up. But I know that the gig's hard. The motherhood gig's hard.
One last thing I want to throw your way before we wrap this conversation up, and that's something you touched on numerous times earlier: identity, and not having it being wrapped up in being an athlete or being a basketball player, football player, whatever it happens to be, and not having it being wrapped up in your results in your respective sport. As a coach, how can you help your athletes at a young level differentiate between who they are and what they do?
Yeah. Well, I think it's valuing them for more than scoring, more than their passing, more than what they do, but also asking questions. So this was something I took from a coaching clinic, and I don't remember which coach. I'd love to give a coach credit, but I don't know. So I used to, on my SFU practice plans, write 4 players' names down, and I would check in with those 4. And so say I had 12, sometimes I had more than that, but you would have checked in with everybody probably twice that week. And it would be at the beginning I might ask about their brother. I might ask about their family. I might have asked about how they're doing in school. I might ask anything, but I put it on there. And I remember saying it at a clinic once, and a coach said, isn't that kind of like, like you're, I don't know the term you use, but like you're plotting it. And I'm like, it's so I don't forget. And so I put it up there because we can get all wrapped up in all the basketball stuff below, but I put it right at the top, and I'm like, this is people. I'm coaching people. Check in with them, see how they're doing. I mean, I had a couple of kids whose parents went through a divorce in their first year at SFU. Well, that's good news. That's good for me to know when they're a bit distracted and I'm getting angry, but really, well, they've got things going on. So I think it's valuing them for things outside of basketball. I think it's developing relationships with them that doesn't always involve basketball. It doesn't have to be, it's also appreciating that they're going to make mistakes. Sport is not perfect. They are not perfect. I think also from the parents, I don't know again who said this, but it's something like the kids come home and you quiz them on how the game went. And what you should say is, you're my favorite player. Like you're and I say that to some of my players when they play at university. I said, "Oh, you're my favorite player on the, whatever team." And so I think it comes from both sides. The parents have to also not overemphasize their child's, like, you're not just that basketball player. I come to watch you play, but I love when I see you with your brothers and sisters. I love when I see you with our cousins. I love when we're at the lake or whatever. So I think it comes from all adults valuing kids from outside of just basketball. I had someone one time, I said something like, I guess I was getting a bit too serious about something, probably coaching. And one of my high school players at Semiahmoo said, "It's not life or death, coach." And I was like, "You're right. Let's just go play." Like I was going into the scouting report, probably like a national, and that's what they said. It might have been Maddie McKinnon for all I know, but yeah. And I think sometimes they get it more than we get it.
Very well said, Allison, as has every answer in this interview been. I really appreciate you taking the time on a personal level. My family will be thrilled because I have family ties to Princeton that I brought on some Princeton royalty to this
Yeah, there you go.
podcast. Thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure. The important topic.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and you found some tangible takeaways that you can bring with you in your journey to becoming a better sports parent. The best way for you to support this podcast is for you to subscribe, follow, rate, review, and drop us a comment on whichever platform you're watching or listening. And the fastest way for us to grow this podcast and reach more parents out there is for you to share it with your respective networks and to tell people that you see at your youth sporting events when you're there with your children. Big thanks to Lightstock Music and Andre Diaconou for the music on this podcast, which is a production of Toolkit Content. Until next time, happy sports parenting. And remember, have fun out there. That's what it's supposed to be about.